You will know that it is harvest tide. We did tins and things like that for the food bank last week. There are flowers, the produce of the many gardens of Calverley around the church. It still slightly smells of beer from the beer festival, and you're about to get a short lecture on giving from the vicar. All is present. It's a peculiar thing to do this, perhaps even a little dangerous. Here's the point of these biannual giving sermons. It's not me begging, it's not me twisting your arm. If you believe, as I do, that the God who creates and sustains the universe loves you and calls you to join him in the work of his kingdom, to do that somehow in relationship, in connection with him, then that is life in all its fullness. And excluding a bit of our life from thinking about it with God, with prayer, with God's people, will diminish that. If we don't think about our giving with our faith heads on, if we check that at the door, then what you are opting for is life in some of its fullness. And that would be a shame. So this is not me telling you off. This is me sort of processing out loud the thoughts I've had this week on how do we live well in terms of finances and lead a richer, fuller life with our wallets and our bank accounts. Exploring things that, if we tuck them away, remain hidden or festering or shameful or just awkward because we're British, that will trip us up. I want us to think as well, there'll be a few practical bits about how we use our money here at church and how you can make an informed choices about keeping this place open and thriving and loving God and loving Calverley together with our resources. So let's start by having a quick look at that gospel moment that I read. It's Jesus seeing the rich givers and the widow giving, and he praises the widow for her mite, is the term, for this tiny little bit that she gives. And it's interesting, there's two types of people there. He's not cross with either of them. It's nice that we have a bit of the gospel where Jesus isn't telling people off. Let me be really clear. I don't know how many of you give how much. I never want to know. It makes it complicated if I do. So I can't possibly be telling anybody off about this stuff, right? It's all anonymous. So I don't know if we've got rich givers or widows here by name. But I've been in churches for a while, so I assume that we have both of those types of people. People who are giving faithfully, generously, sacrificially out of having very little, and people who have prayerfully and carefully thought, yes, I've got enough money and this is the amount that I will give to church, and put it in. And Jesus seems to be happy with both of those types of people, and especially pleased with the widow. I bet we have other people. I know we often have visitors here who are just passing through. And to them I say, it's lovely to see you, church is free. You know, it's not, you don't feel obliged to dig in if this is not your church. Not that we would decline your generous gifts, and gift aid facilities are available. There are those who haven't thought about it yet, I bet. I was this person. When I first came to faith, second time I came to faith, I used to go along to church down at St. George's in the middle of Leeds, and I would cheerfully give to God whatever I found in my wallet that week. Very happily. It didn't occur to me that I should or could plan and think and pray about that. It just, I don't know, didn't occur to me. It hadn't popped into my head. You can blame the ADHD. Are you struggling with my sound? I'll keep still. All right. Thank you. It didn't occur to me that I should be doing other than giving to God from what was effectively kind of the leftovers of my week for a long time, when I realised that was a bit different. I didn't realise that the church needed to know how much I was giving, because then you can plan. We have regular outgoings. We want to know what's coming in every week. I also didn't realise they could get 25% extra by claiming back the gift aid and the tax bonus. Just hadn't thought about it. We might have some of those. We might have some people, like I was then, when I first started going to church, Victoria wasn't going to church with me. We weren't giving away our joint income to church. She didn't think God was real. Why would she be doing that? That makes it quite complicated. If you're in that sort of a relationship, I'm aware that that's tricky. I have no real advice for you other than to be talking to each other. But there might also be those who are trying not to think about it. You might be the place that I was when I had realised, I should probably be thinking and praying about this, but if I do, it's going to cost me some of my money that I'd like to spend on other things. But I would say, if you're in that place, if you're ducking this, then having been there, the sooner you wrestle with this, the less time you will spend regretting not wrestling with it. This is part of life in all its fullness. The danger here for you, if that were you, is of missing out. I think the real danger for those preaching on this, I was trying to imagine, if Jesus had, instead of talking to his disciples, turned around and preached to the people in the temple that day, said, folks, the temple roof is leaking, we need a bit more money. It could be that the rich people go away and look in their savings. But also, I imagine, that faithful widow goes home and sells the stuff that she's got and gets herself in trouble to be generous. I've met people who are faithful like that. And then needs to go back to the temple and ask for some money because she's broken. So we need to be really careful. I don't want my sermons on giving to beggar any widows, if that makes sense. We want to think about that. What I want for us all to do is to see the place of finances within this life in all its fullness that we're called. And it's interesting to see how much Jesus has to say about this. In 2 weeks, I'm going to try and preach a sermon on sex and marriage and relationships. What's hard about that, other than me sort of swallowing how difficult and awkward that's going to be, is that Jesus doesn't say very much about that. Hardly anything. He has a lot to say about money, though. If you just look up, if you Google it when you get home, other search engines are available. What does Jesus say about money? Tons. We clearly need to be very careful with it. He talks about where we put our money, that's where our treasure is. And that which we treasure, we can end up worshipping, and it will distract us from our true connection with God. We can end up worrying about it. We've had sermons on worrying recently. Worrying about money, I've heard a term this week, is called bankxiety. It's a good bankxiety, because either you haven't got enough and you don't want to deal with it, or you've got too much and you don't want anyone else to get it. You can end up just generally worried or jealous or greedy or covetous or selfish or insecure or too secure. Money and thinking about it wrong or spending it wrong can get in the way of every connection you have and need to flourish and live well. How are we going to live well with our money as Christians? First of all, it helps if you've got enough. I recognise that. It's a problem, and we should be doing what we can to make sure people do have enough. Maybe giving it to those who need it and voting wisely. There's a strong correlation, I was learning this week, between the rise of mental health disorders, anxiety, depression, things like that, and poverty. If you don't have enough, your worries are genuine and real. Turns out it's about £36,000 is the threshold. If you have less than that in this country, you are really, really worrying, and you're in trouble. Above that, between £36,000 and £110,000, every pound extra you earn is going to make you happier. But not in proportion. If you're earning 36 grand a year, you make an extra couple of grand, you can have a holiday that you couldn't before. If you're earning 80 grand a year, you can have a nicer holiday than the one you were already having. If you earn more than that, 120 or more, apparently it will make you worse off in terms of your mental health. People who earn much more than that are, on average, more likely to be miserable and isolated and insecure and paranoid and stingy. The mental health of millionaires, if you win the lottery, it comes with counselling attached. It is really bad for you to be very rich. It's possible to do well, but on average, Wallis Simpson famously said, "You can never be too rich or too thin." And she was not right. I should say, if we want to deal well with money, first of all, it does help to have enough and to be managing it well. If you are stuck, if things are tight, come and see me. There are things we can do to help. I can hook you up with the food bank or Christians Against Poverty. We'll see what we can do to help. Yeah, I think that's not mostly what Jesus is talking about here. But let's see, if we want to think about living wisely, if you do have enough, then what does Paul have to say in that passage we read? He seems to have 3 points in no particular order. First of all, the famous bit, he says, each of you, he says each man, but I think it's everybody, whatever your gender, should decide what you're going to do in your heart, for the Lord loves a cheerful giver. So basic advice from Paul, think about what you're going to give, to whom, and do it cheerfully, which means, I guess, not putting your head in the sand and ambling through life like I used to and giving from your leftovers, but also don't let anybody, whether or not they've got a dog collar on, berate you into giving money that you're resentful of. That's not right or good or fair either. Then there's this stuff about sowing generously, reaping generously. Did it feel awkward reading that, Denise? Like, oh, if you're generous, God will give you stuff. It sounds a bit like that prosperity gospel stuff that American pastors in shiny suits will give at the front of church. Please, give us all your money, the Lord will bless you, and he will bless me with a new Ferrari. This is what blessing looks like. I think that's not true. That can't be true, because as we've established, having lots and lots and lots of money is in fact bad for you. God's not going to bless you by giving you stuff that is bad for you. You might need more. I think the biggest problem with that thought that I give so that God will give money to me turns God into like a money robot, like a system that you can play. You can gamify your generosity. I want to be rich, so I'll be generous at church and God will then give me money. That just doesn't seem true to me. Most generous Christians in the world currently are living in Africa or in China. That's your average Christian, not known for overflowing with wealthy Christians. It's not how it works. And most billionaires aren't happily giving all their money away. One or two are, and thank God for them. That said, I can't quite dismiss the idea of these generous, faithful givers sometimes getting more money to then give away and bless other people. There's something about that seems to go on some of the time. It's interesting. You know, Charles Wesley apparently said, "Gain all you can, save all you can, give all you can." And that was adopted by Rockefeller and adopted by other people recently. So maybe sometimes when we're generous, God says, okay, I'll throw a bit of money away. I don't know how that works. It's very, very complicated. Mostly, I think it seems that faithful, right, wise living, those people tend to make sensible decisions and not squander their money. What I do know is that we are offered blessings in abundance, which doesn't mean like a financial quid pro quo. These are the things you get from God. When you are operating generously with your money, when you're not worried about it and dealing with it out of fear, you can get to a place where you're more at ease in your life and have more joy and more peace. And it just feels good to give stuff away. There's all sorts of research on that. If you give people randomly £10 each, and half of them you say, here, spend this on yourself, treat yourself. And the other half say, go and treat somebody else. And then measure a day, a week, a month later how much happier they are. These people have done better. There is something about giving that is good for you. I think that's what we get from God. It's complicated. There's a million sermons and some lectures in theology there, but there we go. Paul's third point is about that giving supplies the needs of God's people, of the church. The Corinthians, there were some people in Corinth with money, and other Christians in Jerusalem with no money, and their giving allowed God's people to keep doing what they needed to do. And that is still exactly the same. A quick reminder, this is not theological, just practically. This is how church money works, in case you don't know. We don't get any money from the Church of England. Some people think we do, but we don't. The Church of England, by which I mean Leeds Diocese, because that's our bit, they get money from us. They've shared out their budget amongst all the parishes in the diocese and looked at which churches have how many people and what's the average income in that area, and they do this parish share system to make it fair. And they use that to pay vicars and to pay for vicars' housing, but they run a safeguarding team for when something complicated happens. I can call them and go, what should I do? They run a finance team. So when we need to raise 45 grand to fix the roof, as we do next year, we talk to Janet and she tells us about fundraising and how to write letters and which grants we should apply for and when and how that works. We couldn't be doing that without them. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do more effectively centrally amongst 100 or so churches than each church doing it. They train vicars, they train licensed lay ministers like Kim. We couldn't do it without that. We would struggle in all sorts of ways without the diocese. And also, to be fair, I mean, if we said, we'll all pay for our own vicars, thank you very much, you guys in Calverley could probably afford to pay and house a vicar, because Calverley is, it's a nice place. The last vicar of Calverley is now down the road in Armley. I'm not sure they could afford to pay for and house Phil in Armley. And that's not fair that we get a vicar and they don't, right? And if Jesus turned up and he'd only got so much Jesus to go around, well, he'd be more likely to be in Armley and Osmonthorpe and Gipton and Hare Hills and places like that. That's how it works. So parish share is a fair way of us making sure everybody's got a vicar according to that. It's a big chunk of our outgoings. It's was about 70 grand last year, I think. It's going up every year as we catch up to where it ought to be. It was too low for a long time. The rest of our money goes on heating and lighting, on salary for Carol and Kerry and Susan and Toby, who do the bits we need done reliably, consistently every week. Other bits go on new felt tip pens for kids to colour in, because they're in all the time, and that's not cheap. And coffee and all sorts of stuff. It keeps us going. It's about half and half, parish share and keeping ourselves going. But we have no money but yours. We make a little bit from the barn, but it mostly pays for itself. And for the last couple of years, we haven't quite paid our parish share. We have not put in what the diocese told us, this is what you should be paying. We've been close, but we're not there. Okay, first set of facts. Second thing, the Church of England recommends, it turns out, that the average Christian gives 10% of their money away. 5% to your church, 5% to something else, to causes that are close to your heart, because charities are good things. Take that with a pinch of salt. If you're earning much less than that 36 grand a year number, to start giving away 10% of that might put you like the widow who would be at risk. That could make your life harder and more difficult. I'm not sure that's necessarily what God wants. It's for all of us to weigh up the sacrifices of our giving, but 10% would be a stretch for some people on limited incomes. If you're earning very much more than that, you could probably afford to give away 20% of your money and still not notice that you weren't fabulously wealthy, right? It's a ballpark figure, and it's a reasonable guideline. It's always worked well for Victoria and I, for transparency's sake. But there you go. What's interesting is what it would mean for the church. So I did some maths, just for fun, because I like a sum. So if you take our average sort of congregation, and say everybody who's an adult is earning the average income for this patch, and gave 5% of that to this church, at the moment we get £90,000 a year in regular giving, right? Which is probably about, what's that? It would be about 65 grand, and we claim the gift aid on top. The government gives us some tax back. If everybody gave us 5% of their average income, we would be getting regular giving of between 170 and 240,000, depending on how you count it. Which is, well, that's interesting, isn't it? Can you imagine the conversations we will be having at PCC? Instead of, do we pay our share this year? It's like, well, we've paid our share. Shall we give them some extra? Let's employ our families and children's workers to do some youth work out in the village and run that contact centre that we've been talking about to help divorcing couples keep in touch with their kids, and which other charities need supporting. And can we run that? And we'd have fixed the roof and covered it in solar panels and have, it would be amazing. I don't know what we would do with all that money. But that would be lovely if we were all doing the sort of giving that the church recommends. I don't know what you give, and I really don't want to. I'm very happy to talk to anybody if you want to discuss it. But if we all keep talking and thinking and praying about our giving, don't feel pressured. I want this to be a gracious, joyous thing. You go, I would like to do this. I feel grateful to God. We should decide in our hearts and do it cheerfully. And you might do that thinking and give less, and that is fine, please. But it would be a lovely position to be in, a church like that, part of a community like that. And you feel a sense of belonging and pride. Oh yeah, that's my church. Yeah, we run that thing for asylum seekers where we pay English teachers on a Tuesday night. We do this. I don't know what it would be, but wouldn't it be nice to feel sort of smug and proud walking about because of all that fabulousness? I already do, but even more so. And I'll give you some science, because as they say, good theology is only good theology if it works. Adam Grant, who's one of my favourite thinkers and writers, says the data shows that people with high IQs have more unselfish values and give more to charity and prioritise long-term collective good over short-term self-interest. It is smarter to be a giver than a taker. I don't know if you can work that correlation both ways, whether giving more money will make you smarter. It'll make you feel smarter. And it is good for you. Generous living will reduce anxiety, will increase connection, creates a better world for all of us to live in. And it's good for your faith to say, I don't need all of my money. I'm not going to be anxious and make sure this is all going to my savings. I will trust God for this. That's good for us. If the charitable giving in Calverley started going up and it went to places other than this, to places that would benefit Calverley, I'd be happier because you'd all be happier. But I'd be delighted if we were one of those causes as well. There you go. Bit of theology, bit of practical stuff. if you want to wrestle with this, if you've got questions, we're going to stick around after the service and have some lunch with each other, or you can anonymously write them in the box and we will wrestle with them there. Thank you.